Hello, I'm Ethan. I just turned 20 and for the first time I have a place of my own. Well, kind of. Technically, my parents gave me the house as a gift when I turned 18. However, it wasn't in great shape. Definitely one of those fixer-upper types. I've spent the last 2 years putting every spare dollar and minute toward repairing it, piece by piece. The floorboards still creak when I walk. The paint job isn't perfect and the yard looks like an overgrown jungle. But it's mine and I'm proud of that. The house sits at the far end of a quiet cul-de-sac in a typical small-town American neighborhood. You know the type. White picket fences, well-kept yards, and folks walking their dogs as the sun sets. It's the kind of community where neighbors wave from their porches and know each other's names. The only problem? I didn't know anyone. I'd been so busy with repairs and improvements that I never got around to meeting anyone in the neighborhood. I wasn't trying to be unfriendly, I was just preoccupied. I've never owned a car either, still don't. My bike has been my ride since I was 16. My old matte black mountain bike has been through a lot with me. At this point, I can repair almost anything on it with my eyes closed. That's what I was doing that day, crouching in the driveway, messing with the rear wheel and adjusting a chain that wouldn't stay in place. The heat was intense and sweat dripped from my forehead onto the concrete. I didn't even hear her approach. "You seem to have your hands full," a woman's voice called out. I looked up, a bit startled. She stood on the sidewalk in front of my house, wearing a simple summer dress with sunglasses covering her eyes. Her silky brown hair hung just past her shoulders. I couldn't pinpoint her exact age, but she definitely wasn't in her 20s like me. She had a gentle radiance, graceful, confident, and effortlessly beautiful in a way that made you look twice. I wiped the grease from my palms onto my shorts and gave her a polite grin. "Yeah, this chain's being stubborn today," I said. She laughed lightly. "If I were younger, I might ask you for a ride." I froze for a moment. Was she teasing me? I couldn't tell. I glanced up again, and there it was, a cheeky little grin like she knew exactly the effect she had. I chuckled and shot back, "Who says you can't ask now?" She looked at me for a beat, as if debating whether to say more, then giggled under her breath, shook her head, and kept walking. "Enjoy the ride, neighbor," she called out. I stood there, hunched beside my bike, watching her disappear around the corner. I had no idea who she was. Maybe I'd seen her before, but I was too distracted to notice. I went back to tinkering with my bike, pretending to focus, but my thoughts were still trailing after her. Something about her lingered. Her calm confidence, the way she teased so effortlessly. It wasn't just her looks, though she was stunning. She carried herself like she knew exactly who she was. That evening, I sat on the front porch, a cold Coke in hand, watching the sun set behind the rooftops. A couple passed by walking their dog. A few houses down, kids were shooting baskets, just normal neighborhood stuff. But I kept glancing toward the street corner, half hoping she'd walk by again. She didn't. I leaned back on the porch swing and laughed quietly to myself. Maybe this place wouldn't be as dull as I'd thought. The next few days passed as usual. I finished patching up the bathroom, fixed a broken light in the kitchen, and kept battling the wild patch of weeds posing as a lawn. Still no sign of her, not once. I figured she'd just been passing through, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake her from my mind. Then one morning I stepped out of the shower, hair still damp, when I heard a soft knock at the front door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I pulled on a t-shirt, hurried over, and wiped my hands as I went. I opened the door and there she was. This time she wore light slacks and a flowy white shirt, holding a small white package in each hand. Her sunglasses were perched on her head, revealing lovely hazel eyes. For a split second, I felt a strange, restless nervousness I couldn't explain. "Hey," she said with that same easy smile. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything." "Not at all." I replied, stepping back to give her space. Can I help you with something? She held out the package. It's a little welcome gift, donuts from a bakery a few blocks away. Maybe you haven't had time to explore the neighborhood yet. I looked at the box, then back at her, completely caught off guard. Wow, that's really thoughtful, thank you. I'm Sarah, she added, but most people call me Sophie. I took the box, smiling. Nice to meet you, Sophie. I'm Ethan. And yeah, you're right. I haven't left the property much since I moved in. She laughed. Yeah, I've noticed. I've seen you out here with tools a few times. That broke the ice. I gestured toward the small kitchen just beyond the doorway. Want to come in for some coffee? I asked. The place isn't much yet, but it's got 4 solid walls and working plumbing. She gave another soft laugh. Sure, I'd love a cup. We sat at my small kitchen table, a mismatched set. Nothing fancy, just a pair of old chairs and a worn tabletop that had seen better days. I poured her coffee and we dug into the donuts together. Talking to her felt surprisingly natural, like we'd known each other for more than a few minutes. She told me she lived 4 houses down in the blue one with the big oak tree out front. She'd been there for about 15 years, she said. Her 2 kids were in their early 20s, off at college. I raised them on my own, she added, sipping her coffee. Their father left a long time ago. We married too young, and when things got tough, he just walked away. I nodded, unsure how to respond at first. I'm sorry to hear that. That must have been really hard, I said. It was, she replied, her voice not bitter but calm and strong. But it made me stronger. I had to learn to handle everything on my own, and somehow I did. I shared a bit about myself in return, how I'd worked odd jobs since I was 16, saving every penny, how I'd started college but had to drop out when tuition got too steep, and how I'd poured everything into fixing up this house paycheck by paycheck. To be honest, I said, glancing around, it's far from perfect, but I like the challenge. She smiled warmly with genuine admiration. You should be proud. Most guys your age wouldn't have the patience or grit to do what you've done here. I gave a shy shrug, feeling a bit uneasy but grateful for her kind words. What struck me most was how easy it was to talk to her despite our age difference. The conversation felt natural and effortless. After nearly an hour, she glanced at the clock and stood up gently. I should probably go before I wear out my welcome, she said with a smile. It was great to meet you, Ethan. The pleasure's all mine, I said sincerely. Thanks again for the donuts. She started toward the door, hesitated, and looked back with a small smile. By the way, I meant what I said the other day. I raised an eyebrow. What about the ride? She chuckled, that same playful teasing tone, about wishing I was a little younger again. I froze, feeling heat rise to my face. She gave a light-hearted toss of her head, smiled, and walked out. I closed the door behind her, pressed my forehead against it, and laughed quietly to myself. Something told me this wouldn't be the last time I saw her. The next few days were uneventful, but I couldn't shake a strange, restless feeling. I threw myself into home projects. There was always something that needed fixing. The bathroom door squeaked. A gutter came loose after the last storm, and one of the living room switches only worked when it felt like it. I had a long list of small problems to tackle, and I stayed busy. Still, every time I stepped outside, I glanced down the street without thinking. I wasn't sure what I was hoping for, maybe just to see her pass by again. One warm, breezy day, I was outside wrestling with a loose board on the front steps. Sweat dripped from my brow onto the wood as I crouched, hammer in hand, nails scattered around me. That's when I heard those faint, familiar footsteps on the sidewalk. I paused mid-swing and looked up. There she was, Sophie. She wore fitted light blue trousers and a beige sweater, sleeves rolled up to her elbows. A simple silver necklace rested on her collarbone, and her dark hair was pulled back loosely, just brushing her shoulders as she walked. "Hi there, handyman," she called out with a mischievous grin, tucking a stray hair behind her ear. "Back at it again?" I stood, wiping my hands on my jeans. "Yeah, at this point I feel like the neighborhood's unofficial repairman." She laughed softly and stepped off the sidewalk, stopping near the bottom of my porch. "You're doing a great job. Every time I pass by, this place looks better." I gestured at the uneven steps. "Still got a long way to go. I think I'm a work in progress." She tilted her head slightly, her gaze lingering on mine a moment longer than necessary. "Aren't we all?" she said softly, her voice warm. There was a moment, not awkward but electric, like we were both quietly trying to figure out what came next. "I hate to ask," she began, her voice trailing off as she bit her lower lip gently, "but I've got a leaky faucet in my kitchen that's been driving me crazy for weeks. I tried tightening it myself, but no luck." I grinned without hesitation. "I can take a look if you want." Her face lit up. "Would you really?" "Of course," I said. "Lead the way." I grabbed my tools, dusted off my hands, and followed her down the sidewalk to her house, the blue one with the big oak tree, just as she'd described. It had a quiet charm, like it had seen years of real life. The paint was a bit faded, the porch showed some wear, but flowers bloomed along the walkway, and everything felt warm, lived in, and full of love. Inside, the kitchen had cream-colored cabinets and a large vintage farmhouse sink that looked original to the house. The walls were covered with family photos, baby pictures, graduation shots, and those awkward school portraits everyone keeps hidden. There was no mistaking it. This was a home built on love and history. I crouched beside the sink, wrestling a stubborn pipe with a wrench, while she leaned against the counter, arms folded, quietly watching. "I really admire how hard you work," she said after a while. "Most guys your age wouldn't know how to use a wrench." I chuckled, tightening the valve a bit more. "Well, when you're broke and everything you own is falling apart, you either learn fast or sink." She laughed again, a soft, rich sound that filled the kitchen and made everything feel lighter. "You're different," she murmured, her eyes on me. I stood and she handed me an old towel. I wiped the sweat and grease from my hands. "All set," I said. "That should stop the leak." She turned on the faucet, watched the drip vanish, and smiled. When she turned back to me, she was standing a little closer. Not too close, but close enough for me to catch a hint of her sweet floral perfume with a soft note of vanilla. There was a quiet moment between us, not uncomfortable but heavy with something unspoken. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly, "but thank you." "It was nothing," I replied. She hesitated for a second, then reached out, gently resting her hand on my forearm. It was brief, but it sent a sharp electric jolt through me. "I owe you," she said, pulling her hand back. I blinked, caught off guard. "Let me buy you dinner." "That's really not necessary," I said. She tilted her head, that same easy smile playing on her lips. "It's just dinner, Ethan." I was nodding before I even finished thinking about it. "Okay, sure." That Friday night, we met at a small Italian restaurant a few minutes from our neighborhood. It was a cozy place with dim lighting, red and white checkered tablecloths, and old black and white photos of Italy on the walls. Our conversation started light. House projects, funny mishaps, favorite movies, the best pizza toppings, and disasters from failed DIY fixes. But as the night went on, it deepened. She opened up about raising her kids alone, the tough nights she cried through, and the mornings she forced herself out of bed because she had no choice. "There's something strange about a house after the kids leave," she said, gently swirling her glass of wine. "You spend years preparing them to go, and then you realize you weren't ready." I listened, really listened, surprised by how open she was with me. I shared some of my own story, too. dropping out of college when it got too expensive, working 2 jobs just to afford lumber, paint, and plumbing. I admitted I didn't have a plan yet, just kept fixing what I could and hoping things would fall into place. "You've done well for yourself," she said kindly. "You really have, and you should be proud." We stayed there for hours. When we finally left, the streetlights above us glowed softly, casting long shadows on the pavement. The night air was cool but pleasant. She walked with me as we slowly made our way back toward the neighborhood. At the corner where her house was visible through the trees, she stopped. "Thank you, Ethan," she whispered. "I had a great time tonight." "So did I said honestly. She reached out, brushing her fingertips along my arm. "Good night," she said softly. I smiled, feeling that strange flutter again. "Good night, Sophie." She disappeared into her house, leaving me standing still. The street was quiet, the only sound a faint hum of crickets in the distance. I lingered a little longer, my pulse racing, not sure why. But deep down I knew something had shifted between us. I walked home slowly under the soft glow of the streetlights, my mind racing with feelings and thoughts I couldn't quite name. The next morning felt different. I woke up, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me. And all I could think about was her. Sophie. The way she smiled, the way her hand brushed my arm, the warmth in her voice as she said good night. I got up, rubbed my face, and tried to shake it off, but it didn't work. I wasn't a kid, but I'd never felt anything quite like this before. I knew there was an age gap between us, but I couldn't make myself care. I liked her. Simple as that. Over the next week, I started seeing Sophie more often in small moments. She'd wave from across the street while trimming her hedges. One afternoon, she stopped me as I carried grocery bags from the curb and offered to help. Another morning, she showed up with a batch of warm muffins for no reason at all. One afternoon, she knocked on my door with that familiar, playful grin. "I swear I'll never win a fight with a jar of pasta sauce," she said, holding it up. "Think you could save dinner?" "Of course," I said, laughing. I followed her back to her house, twisted the jar, and the lid popped off easily. We both burst out laughing. I stayed a little longer than necessary, and she didn't seem in a hurry for me to leave. As the days turned into nights, something between us started to grow. I'd find random excuses to walk by her house. She'd find just as many reasons to invite me in. Before long, we were spending entire evenings together. We'd cook dinner at her place and eat outside on her back porch under soft string lights, talking about everything and nothing. Sometimes she'd laugh and rest her hand lightly on my knee. I'd reach over and tuck a loose strand of her hair behind her ear while she looked at me with those warm, knowing eyes. One night stands out more than the others. I'd invited her over and made spaghetti, my go-to impress her dinner. We ate outside on my modest patio table lit by the full moon. As the night went on, our conversation slowed and the air grew calm and still. She looked at me and said, "You make me feel alive again, Ethan." I'm not even sure how to explain it. I swallowed hard because honestly I felt the same way. I'd dated girls my age before, but this was different. Deeper, gentler, real. When she leaned in and kissed me, there was no rush or awkwardness. It was soft, slow, and full of feeling. Her lips were warm against mine, her hands resting gently on the sides of my face. When we pulled back and looked at each other, we both knew exactly what we were getting into. We knew the risks, the judgment if anyone found out. But in that moment, none of it mattered. Since then, our nights together changed. I'd ride my bike over after sunset and she'd leave the porch light on to let me know she was waiting. Some evenings we'd curl up on the couch and watch old movies, her head on my shoulder, my arm around her waist. Other times, we'd dance barefoot in the living room to soft music, the silence between us filled with meaning. And other nights, we let our passions carry us away. I won't go into details, but I'll say this. It was always mutual, respectful, and never felt wrong. It felt like two people, both a little lonely and tired of being alone, had finally found comfort in each other. One night, with her head resting on my chest, she opened up in a way she hadn't before. "When I was younger," she said, "I thought I had it all figured out. Marriage, kids, the house with the porch swing, all of it." She paused, her fingers tracing lazy circles on my arm. "But life had other plans. My husband left before I really understood what love was. I spent 2 decades raising my boys, working double shifts, always sacrificing, forgetting I was more than just a mother." I tightened my arms around her and whispered, "Let me give you that, even if it's just for a little while." And I meant it. We started going out together, at first keeping things low-key, staying away from the neighborhood. I took her to the city for late dinners, small live shows, poetry nights at coffee shops, and even the occasional nightclub. She was hesitant at first. The crowds were loud, the people young, the vibe fast and chaotic. But I watched her slowly loosen up, laughing, letting go, and dancing like no one was watching. One night, she twirled under neon lights, her hands in mine, her hair glowing in the blue light. "This is ridiculous," she shouted over the music, breathless from dancing. "I haven't done this in 20 years. I grinned, pulled her closer, and said, "Then tonight's all yours." We stayed out until dawn, walking hand in hand through empty streets, sharing our thoughts, dreams, fears, and regrets. When we reached my bike parked on the sidewalk, she wrapped her arms around me, resting her head against my chest. "I feel alive again," she whispered. And so did I. As I pedaled home that morning, the cool breeze hitting my skin, I realized I was experiencing something rare, something I hadn't expected. Not here, not with her, and definitely not like this. But every time I walked up that path and saw her standing on the porch, smiling simply, I knew I didn't want to be anywhere else. Weeks turned into months, and what we had, our secret, became a source of comfort. We never labeled it. It wasn't a fling, not a typical relationship, not just friendship. It was ours. We'd built a quiet world that only we understood. I spent most evenings at her place after work. Sometimes we'd cook together in her kitchen, half joking, half arguing about whether the garlic bread should be simmered or crunchy. Other nights we'd sit on the porch swing, sipping wine as the sky turned from gold to deep blue. The silence between us was never awkward. Just being near her was enough. Sophie would glance nervously toward the street whenever someone passed by. "Do you think anyone suspects?" she asked one night in a hushed tone. "Maybe," I said honestly, "but does it really matter?" She nestled into me, breathing softly. "No, I stopped caring what people think a long time ago." We kept our distance in public. No hand-holding, no lingering looks, but behind closed doors we were something raw and honest, something real, even if it didn't fit the rules. We never planned for the future or talked about where this was going. Maybe that's what made it so special. We lived it one moment at a time. I'll never forget what she said one night as we lay curled up under a blanket on her couch. The warm glow of candlelight flickering on the walls. "I just want you to know, I'm the happiest I've been in years." I reached out, gently squeezing her hand. "Me too," I said. Even in the dark, I felt her eyes on me. "Ethan, I know this can't last," she whispered. "You'll meet someone closer to your age. You'll settle down, start a family, live a normal life." Her words hit harder than I expected. She shifted slightly, her voice softer still. Promise me something, okay? Promise you'll remember me, not as the older woman down the street, but as the one who made you happy while you were still figuring out your life. I turned to her, tracing my fingertips along her cheek. I promise, I said. We didn't say much after that. We just held each other, both quietly aware that our time was winding down. When autumn came, things changed. Our time together grew less frequent. Sophie got more involved with volunteer work and saw her sons more often. I landed a full-time job with a local construction crew, spending most of my days on job sites. By the time evening came, I barely had the energy to keep my eyes open. We both felt the distance growing, but neither of us tried to bridge it. That was always the beauty of what we had. It was never about holding on too tightly. It was about being fully present while it lasted. The last time I saw her as more than just a neighbor was simple and quietly perfect. I stopped by to return a book she'd lent me. She invited me in, and we sat on the porch swing one last time. There was no drama, no tears, just a quiet understanding. "You gave me back what I thought I'd lost," she said calmly. "You gave me my youth." I smiled at her. "And you, Sophie, gave me something too. You taught me what it means to truly care for someone." We held each other, long and close, neither of us wanting to let go just yet. When we finally parted, she leaned in and kissed me softly on the cheek. "Goodbye, Ethan. Goodbye, Sophie." I walked home under the bright autumn sky, dried leaves crunching under my boots, the night air crisp and clear. When I reached my porch, I turned back and looked toward her house. Her porch light was still on, as it always had been. I smiled. That chapter of my life had closed, and I was okay with that. We stayed neighbors, friendly when our paths crossed. We'd exchange polite waves and small talk. Life moved on for both of us. But that world we built together, that private, fragile, impossible love was ours. No one else ever knew, and I never felt the need to tell. Even now, years later, every time I ride past that house on my bike, I smile without thinking, because I kept my promise. In the quiet corners of our everyday lives, stories like Ethan's and Sophie's remind us that love doesn't adhere to timelines, age gaps, or societal expectations. It's a fleeting spark that can ignite when we least expect it, teaching us to embrace the present with open hearts. Their unlikely connection, born from simple acts of kindness like fixing a leaky faucet, blossomed into a profound bond that healed old wounds and rediscovered lost youth. Yet its beauty lay in its impermanence. They cherished each moment without clinging to forever, learning that true fulfillment comes from being fully alive in the now, rather than fearing the end. This tale tugs at our souls, showing how vulnerability and courage can bridge divides, turning loneliness into shared joy, even if only for a season. It urges us to look beyond judgments, to seek genuine connections that nourish our spirits, and to let go gracefully when paths diverge, carrying forward the warmth of what was. Life's most valuable lessons often whisper through such intimate encounters. That happiness isn't about perfection or permanence, but about the quiet courage to love freely and release without regret. If this story moved you, share your own experiences of unexpected love or life lessons in the comments below. Your thoughts could inspire someone else. And if you enjoyed this heartfelt narrative, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another emotional journey. Let's build a community of storytellers together. What's your story?